Now, what's happening in Europe? We're not going to get into it in a great. Uh, I mean, it's an incredibly interesting and also tragic story that really uh, highlights the depths of human stupidity. But uh, in short, what happened was that there were two alliance systems in Europe that were counterbalanced to the other. So basically, um, the real alliance on against Germany were the French and the Russians. And the reason why the French and the Russians were allied against Germany was because France was on one side and Russia was on the other. France had actually lost a war to the Germans in the 1870s, and Russia felt threatened by Germany because this had been a period of time when Germany was uniting. And so they saw a common cause by saying that, well, if Germany had to go to war in France, then they would have to fight, or either in Russia, they would have to fight a two-front war, which nobody wants to do that. Okay, so the French and the Russians are on the side of or against Germany. Germany then gains allies with Austria-Hungary, which is an ancient empire that controls much of southeastern Europe, and Italy, which is a newly formed United Kingdom. And so they call themselves the Central Powers. And you can obviously see why they call themselves the Central Powers, right? And then there was, so basically then there were the Central Powers and the Franco-Russian alliance. And then there was another little country here called Belgium, and Belgium was neutral. Belgium said, we're not going to be on either side. The problem was that Belgium was a likely path of invasion from Germany into France. And so Britain decided to guarantee Belgian neutrality, meaning that if anybody invaded Belgium, then England would be drawn into the war. That didn't actually create an alliance with France and Russia, because what it meant was not that if France and Germany went to war, England would get involved, or if Russia and Germany went to war, but only if somebody invaded Belgium. Okay. So what happened was that a lot of really stupid things happen, and eventually they come to the point where they're going to mobilize for war. And one of the things about warfare during this period is that warfare has become mechanized, industrialized, and both, or actually all sides, had detailed plans of how they were going to fight a war if a war came about. Okay, and the Germans' plan was called the Schlieffen Plan, and the idea behind the Schlieffen Plan was that they would invade Belgium, take Paris, and if they took Paris, that would knock France out of the war, and then they would turn their armies against Russia. Okay, so when they finally do that, when they finally put this plan in motion, let me just say this: before I get to the actual results of the plan, is that the plan, once it's set in motion, can't be stopped because it is too complex. The idea here is that all of the countries in Europe believed that there was going to be a war, and they all believed it was going to be a very short war. They believed that it would be over very quickly, and so the result was that both sides, neither side would be willing to back down once they had started to mobilize, because the mobilization, if you tried to stop the mobilization, then in order to reset, it would take days to get everything back in place. So once the mobilization had begun, they couldn't stop it. And Germany starts its mobilization, and then that leads them to invade Belgium and France. So they basically make it to the outskirts of Paris. But because they had invaded Belgium, Britain sends an expeditionary force to France. And with the addition of the British troops, the Germans were stopped at Paris before they entered Paris, and they were pushed back. And then that is going to lead to really 4 years of stalemate, because the idea behind these systems of alliances was that if one country invaded another country, they weren't really just invading that country, they were invading them and all their allies. And so the idea was then that neither side would be able to win, that it would be impossible to win. One country might defeat another country, but one country couldn't defeat a bunch of other countries. And so the idea then would be that it would be impossible to win. And that turned out to be true. It was impossible to win. So because the balance of power was so close, or well balanced, I guess you could say, between the two sides, the war just continues on and on. And that's where we get into trench warfare, where both sides dig these series of trenches that go all the way from the North Sea to Switzerland, and neither side is able to make any kind of advance for like four years. Okay, so then what happens is that because neither side can gain a military victory, both sides declare economic warfare.